Welcome to Industry Insights. I'm Professor Darin Detwiler, and today I'm very excited to be able to talk with Adam Sharma. Welcome, Adam. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Great. Adam, you are with Human IT, and I don't think many of us in our audience has heard of that. What is Human IT, and what do you do there?
Sure. So Human IT is we're actually a nonprofit. We consider ourselves social entrepreneurs, and our goal is to really connect low-income individuals to digital resources. So by digital resources, we talk about computers, high-speed internet, digital literacy training, and then of course tech support to make sure that they can use all of those resources. And we do that by working with corporate partners to refurbish their old devices that are no longer being used in the corporate setting. They come to us, we refurbish those, provide all the business services that a company of that size would need. So HIPAA and DoD compliant data destruction, inventory management, and then we go ahead and make sure those devices are properly repurposed and reused, as opposed to the alternative recycling.
Right, because I would imagine on their side, there's got to be accountability for whether it's tax purposes or inventory. And then that's a very good point. The idea of data destruction and HIPAA requirements, you would have to support them. And then once you take care of all that, we could probably look at it in terms of not only social impact, but environmental impact as well, because they're not throwing those computers away into some landfill or something.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. There's a ton of environmental impact that comes out of it. Starting with just the recycling process as a whole. You take your computer that you guys are probably looking at me on right now, right? And look at the plastics, the metals, the minerals involved in it. To get those back into raw form, it takes a lot of energy, right? So you're looking at emissions on that side of things, as well as to replace that item, you have to make a new one, right? And what are the emissions and resources associated with making the new device and then shipping it over here, right? And the other piece of that is, especially with plastics and some minerals, every time you melt that down, it degrades, right? So the degradation is a huge issue, and we want to keep things in their highest best use, right? So if you want to take plastics as an example, right, your bicycle helmet, that's some of the hardest plastic and often used in parts of your car as well. So once that's recycled, melted down, then maybe it's in your computer, fairly hard still, right? Once that's recycled, it can't be that hard ever again. So now it's going to go into another use, maybe a water bottle, right? And then once it's a water bottle, again, it can never be that strong again. So now what is it? Now it's a plastic bag. And once you get the plastic bag, it's kind of done. So the longer we can keep devices or materials in that hardest form, the better we all are off as far as the life of the material and recycling and the environmental piece of things.
Well, and perhaps an associated for technology is, are you dealing with the software and is it updated? Is it not corrupt? Is it usable? Are there licensing issues when you put this computer into someone's hands? I don't even know it. Does it have to meet certain standards in terms of these programs and not those programs? And do you guys take care of that too?
So there's no national standard. There's no standard like that. Every school uses different software and hardware, and but we have our own standards, right? We have certain minimums that we won't go below, especially now with the advent, or the not the advent, but so much more virtual learning going on, right? I don't want somebody having a device that was great for homework 2 years ago, right? They could do all their research, they could write their papers, but they can't do video while doing anything else, right? That's not enough. It's not good enough anymore.
It really is that idea of, is it going to benefit this new user?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's our approach. We like to look at it from that end, right? Because that's one of the benefits of being a nonprofit, right? The stakeholders and the shareholders we answer to are very different than the profit centers, right? So we get the luxury, if you will, of saying, is this going to perform the function that the person that we're giving it to needs it to perform? Right. And that answer is different depending on what that function is. So we have to oftentimes tailor the devices that we're using it's different for a first grader than it is for a third year college student. right? Those are completely different devices.
Well, is it safe to say that, I guess, there might be people out there that aren't thinking about schools and they're making assumptions that aren't the schools providing all these computers?
They try. Um, so sometimes, CARES Act funding helped a lot, but CARES Act left out charter schools,
Hmm.
right? CARES Act left out, it wasn't specific enough for higher education. Community colleges often got left out. Um, whereas higher ed just got a bucket of money, right? They didn't get, it wasn't as prescriptive as to what that money needs to be used for. Now, most K-12s did try to go to that one-to-one model. And to be honest, it's been happening for years, right? People understand the impact of not having a computer. I think it's something like 80 some percent of jobs by 2025 will need some form of digital literacy or some kind of background with a computer. So a lot of schools were already moving towards that one-to-one model, and this additional funding and situational really just pushed them towards it faster.
Hmm. Well, it makes sense because it's not just the functionality, it's also the idea of those, let's say, first graders, second graders, third graders. If they don't have that, building up the skill and comfort and competency using the computer, that's going to harm them down the road. They may be not
Right.
as supported for success as those who have been exposed to using the computer and developing skills. But what about
Yeah, there's tons of
outside
good
of,
research on that too.
oh sure, oh sure. But outside of education, I mean, you and I had talked previously about the idea that putting computers into populations that don't have that, even if we're not talking about education, has incredible impact.
Yeah, it's so important. Um, it ranges from. I mean, think about, I urge people, watching here to think about what you use your computer for, right? You manage your finances most likely, right? You apply for jobs, you find jobs. Word processing is a big thing. Like, have you ever tried to create a resume on a phone? I mean, I haven't, but I don't imagine it would go too well. But one of the examples that is kind of pertinent and kind of the bigger example is I worked on a project a couple of years ago with CalFresh, which is California's equivalent to, or California's version of SNAP or food assistance, right? Food stamps, as they're colloquially known. And we were working on their physical form, right? So CalFresh's physical form is a 38-page monstrosity front and back that also, I think there's like two other programs that are on there, but you can't separate them. You can only do half of it. You have to kind of go through and skip page here and 2 pages there and all that. And so people have to fill that out. They don't get that form until they go to the office, right? They fill out a prereq form, then they go into the office. And most of these people, again, we're talking about low income people that qualify for the program, and they very rarely have cars. So they're reliant on public transportation. They often work one or two jobs or three, right? And then they usually have children as well, right? So you have to account for all of those things just to go into the office once, right? So it takes maybe, let's say it takes 2 hours on a bus to get there. You're dragging your kids with you. You're losing X dollars from not working your shift at whatever job it is. And then you get there and you don't have a piece of information that that form requires. Well, now you have to go home and do it all again,
Mm,
right? And that's in stark contrast with the online form that they have, which is, step by step. You can save it at every step of the way. And if you don't have something, you can save it, go get the item that you need, come back to it then, come back to it later if you need to. Oftentimes, you may need to get that from your employer, and you can't just get it right in the moment, right? So they have that saved form and they can come back and pick up right where they left off, as opposed to having to go back into the office physically and deal with another loss of potential wages. Maybe they chose to pay for childcare at that point. So the double loss in that sense in some of their minds. And when you couple that with the amount of the benefit, right, the actual dollar amount, it may not even be worth it for them, or they may not think it's worth it for them. So when they have a computer, this is something they can do in 35 minutes, 30, 40 minutes maybe in the evening between jobs after work, while they're putting the kids to bed, whatever it is. Um, yeah, so that's one of the most kind of tangible examples that I've seen recently.
and I would imagine that when you start looking at the measuring that impact, you're not just helping a family now, you're helping that family with kids in terms of the long-term health benefits of nutritious food, not starving, fresh foods, and all the above.
Absolutely.
Hmm. Um, so so when you, I mean, I get it, and I'm sure people at work get it, but when you go out to uh, people at your work, when you go out to a company, let's say, and you want to propose that they interact with you for this project, that they consider, when they replace their computers, to give their old computers to you, essentially. How do you go about quantifying and persuading them, and trying to, measure that social impact?
Sure. So two kind of questions there, right? The measurement's a huge piece of things. But let me touch on the first part, right? We when we started the company, and this is before my time, so I'm not going to take credit for it. We understood that there were a lot of nonprofits that needed computers, and there were a couple of them that existed even in our our geography at the time. Right? We're nationwide now, but they would come in, they would take, the 10% of working, great looking items that are in awesome shape. And then they leave you with a pile of, or a room full of what you would consider, that company considers e-waste. We decided to take the opposite approach from the beginning, right? We're going to come in and we're going to solve your problem. We want to make it easy to do good, right? At the beginning, we didn't even charge for any of our services. That wasn't ultimately sustainable in the long run, but so that's why we provide that data destruction, all that accounting, that accountability, right? The donation receipts. Luckily, as a nonprofit, again, it's a charitable deduction, right? So all those items are tax deductible for the company, and it's really about finding the value, right? You create value, and that's what businesses do, and nonprofits may not do for a business, and that's why we're different. Right. And honestly, it's why I joined the company, because otherwise I may have been looking for other other options back then. Um, so yeah, we create value for our partners, and that's really what it is. Whether that value is it sustainability, weight diversion rates, is that something they're tracking? Some companies never had a CSR, corporate social responsibility program before, and they were working with us for their e-waste. So now we can say, hey, you have one. You just need to talk about it, right? Look what we've created for you, or look what you've created just by working with us, and that provides them value. The data destruction piece of things is huge, right? We provide how much time it takes to wipe a computer, especially if you don't take a hard drive out and you try to do it each one by one. That takes a lot of time from the IT department. And as we all know, time is money, right? To go with the old adage. And it just, by saving them that amount of time, the IT department can go do what they do best, right? They can go troubleshoot. They can go help the people who are providing value to that company to do that, and not have to sit there and worry about wiping the drive on some 5-year-old computer that they're about to donate or get rid of in any other way, right?
So is your organization employing people to do that work then?
Correct. Yeah. So we have a different method. We can do it in bulk, right? We can wipe, I think, 400 and some devices at a time, right? As opposed to one by one, which some of these companies are
I
doing,
can't even do
right?
one
And
at a
we've,
time.
over years.
Wow, wow. As you were talking, I've thought about the idea that, I don't have any idea, and I would imagine that the people watching this don't have any idea. Um, what are we talking about in terms of your organization? How many households do you think you impact approximately, on an annual basis or something like that?
Sure.
Or maybe it's a goal. Maybe it's your
So
goal.
last
Right.
year, yeah, I gotta kind of pull numbers from all different areas, right? Because we impact people with all four areas I mentioned before, right? So last year, and obviously last year, demand skyrocketed, and the pandemic really shone us a spotlight on our industry in a sense, as far as the digital divide goes, right? So I'd say last year we probably impacted, I want to say, probably just under 200,000, right? So that's we supported all of Detroit's public schools in tech support. We support, which is 50 plus. We got 50, between 50 and 55,000 households connected to internet in one way or another. And then another 60,000 devices went out. Now, I'm sure there's some overlap in some of those areas, but between those three areas, we really do provide quite a bit. And then there's digital literacy piece too, which is an online class that we offer. Usually it's someone helping a parent or a sibling or something like that get onto that class. So that's kind of what we did last year. That's far improvement from 2 years prior to that, and even the year before that. But we were really approaching that. Our e-waste side of the business really took off in 2019. Right, we had our best year by far. That hockey stick growth that people like to talk about. We hit that in 2019 for that side, and then the program side was already poised to follow, but the pandemic certainly put a little bit of a booster on that.
Wow. Do you think that post-pandemic you're going to continue to see certain similar trends and patterns?
Yeah, I do think so. I think people understand the difference now. That they understand what being disconnected or unconnected means. We see it. We saw it before, right? And it just wasn't as widespread. But it goes from anywhere from students not being able to do their homework. But what does that mean? We talked about measuring impact, or we will talk about measuring impact in a minute. And you really want to dive into it. And one of the things that I do, because it's interesting to me, is I work with sports teams a lot and leagues, and a lot of them focus on community, get out and play type of initiatives. Right? NFL's got Play 60, the NBA's got one, and then each individual team have those types of things. Well, and they, what does this make a difference? Why do we care if they have laptops? We want them outside playing, right? In reality, if they don't have a laptop, they have a choice. They can play a sport and not do their homework, or they can stay after school, not play a sport, and do their homework. And you have an issue there because not doing your homework is not a good choice. Right? We want kids to succeed academically, and we want them to go on to higher education or whatever vocation they want to do, right? Whatever makes sense in their lives. So choosing actively, it's heartbreaking to have somebody actively choose to do something they love, versus something that will give them a better lot in life. So it ranges so far and wide of to what these issues and not having a device means, right? And I can quote all kinds of stats about jobs, right? So there's a study done recently that showed that if they had a 10% increase in broadband penetration, that would result in approximately 220 jobs per year. So increase in 2016, both subsequent 3 years would have 20,000 jobs, which ultimately leads to a GDP increase of almost $37 billion, right? We can extrapolate those, and people have, and there's a lot of studies, but ultimately, and that's the large scale, and depending on who you're talking to, you make those points, right? If I'm talking to politicians, that's what I'm talking about. But when you're talking to community organizations and families, they don't care, right? They care about what does that mean for my family? How can I increase how can I better my situation? That's all it comes down to, right? And even sports, the after school programs, it doesn't have to be sports. I use sports as an example, right? But it's music programs, art programs, all these things that are no longer in our classrooms that are extracurriculars are impacted by the student's ability to participate is impacted because they have to be locked into that computer lab after school so they can get their homework done. And that's just not a choice that we want people to have to make.
I think that really shines a bright light in terms of how important this is. I mean, I don't think about it in terms of the multiple tasks. That idea of this isn't a sports or a study. This allows you to be physically active and study, and balance that out.
Right.
It allows you to be working on your finances and looking at your career development and working at trying to find health and nutritional needs for your family and communicating. There's so many different things that this one piece of technology could do for an individual or for family. Um, and we talked about the idea of measuring social impact. What are some last thoughts in terms of measuring the social impact that this makes, or maybe it's an anecdote or an observation you've made?
Yeah, measuring impact is probably one of the toughest things, right? Nonprofits as an industry are very bad at it, right? We measure impact. I quoted all those numbers of households we helped, right? But that's just output. Right? We need to. I think it's important for nonprofits to make that distinction more. Right? That's output. That's not impact. Right? What is impact? Is impact the impact is grades, right? We put out a survey a year after a distribution a couple years ago, and 94% of respondents, about 300 people, 94% of them, if they had a child in the home or were going to school themselves, reported at least a letter grade improvement, a letter grade, right? That's not a small amount. And if you think about it, you can push that even further, right? Better grades means better opportunity for academic scholarships, right? Better grades, and also just intrinsically, when you're good at something or you succeed at something, it makes you feel better and more interested in pursuing it further, right? So the difference between C's and B's and A's, I think, is a lot bigger than people might put credit on or put or pay attention to, right? So, but measuring impact is hard. Measuring impact is really hard because we don't know, right? I quoted the jobs numbers from a little bit ago, but what does that mean in 30 years? What is, giving someone a computer today means they go to college. What does that mean their lifetime earnings is increased? Does that mean what does that mean if they were a juvenile offender, right? Does it decrease recidivism because now they have more opportunity? They're not going to jump back into that situation that they were into before, maybe. I don't know, right? And we just don't know because A, there hasn't been a lot of studying done on this. It's probably only in the past 4 or 5 years. And B, there hasn't been enough time elapsed where it was such a stark difference between having and not having computing power.
Well, and it sounds like, just to kind of wrap this up, I mean, there's that whole thing about give a man a fish or teach a man to fish or whatever.
Right.
You can give a kid a ball, you can give a kid a trumpet, you can give a kid a Happy Meal or whatever. But when I'm getting a sense that, looking at this, putting that computer into the household is almost like you're playing the entire Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You're helping them meet their nutritional and their health needs. You're helping them build their sense of security, even if it's financial security. You're helping them in terms of being socially connected. You're helping them in terms of their self-confidence and their self-esteem, and you're hopefully building towards their self-actualization, whether it's through grades or opportunity.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I might steal that.
all right. Well, Adam, thank you very much. This is, again, there's some sectors that we talk about. There's other sectors we don't talk about. I think that, in my passive teaching, I've talked about this, but mostly environmental. I've never really thought about this in terms of social impact. And I think that, this is one of those great examples of where it's not just a one-dimensional approach, and it's not just a one-dimensional impact. We talk about the United Nations 17 different sustainable development goals and how interconnected they are. And I could see how here's a scenario where the technology and what your organization does is really a multi-dimensional impact. It's not just any one measurable social impact. And I really hope that not only your continued success, but I hope that the audience watching this gets a really good insight into this topic. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.